Okay, good morning, everyone. It's so nice to have you here. I'm Diane Monig, our Director of Programs here at the ARC of Northern Virginia. I want to do a shout out to Nicole Zupan, who you see here on the screen. She is our amazing support coordinator who helped organize this event. And I'd like to welcome our presenters, Jeannie Cummins with the Office of Community Housing with DVHDS. As we lovingly refer to her as the guru of housing. Donna Budway from our Stomping Ground. She is the Programming and Community Outreach Director. And then we have two parents here with us to kind of share their creative housing stories, Donna Vostel and Patrick Cross. So all of our attendees are on mute. What we're going to do today is start with Jeannie to do her presentation, and then we'll go through all of the panelists to present, and then we'll take questions and answers at the end. But if people have questions, feel free to type them into the chat so that we can keep track of them. That would be great. This recording of the webinar and the slides that all of the presenters are using will be sent to you later today or tomorrow. And then our recording will be available on our YouTube channel. And so with that, I'll let you get started. So Jeannie, thank you. And you can go ahead and share your screen.
All right, give me just a second to get it up and running here. Okay, can you see it?
No.
No, all right, let's try again. How about now?
There we go, perfect.
Sweet, all right. Okay, so my name's Jeannie Cummins. I work with the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Services in our Office of Community Housing. And I'm the Senior Regional Housing Coordinator. So my role really is to help create certain kinds of housing resources for people through partnerships across the state with different kinds of housing agencies and developers and folks like that. And then help connect individuals to those resources. So today we're going to kind of go over what some of those resources are and how you might be able to access them. But before we do that, I want to kind of level set and make sure that we all know what we're talking about here. So the resources that I'm going to cover really are about helping people to access integrated, independent housing. And, you know, briefly, that's housing just like you or I might live in. So the core features of integrated independent housing are that a person doesn't reside with their parent, grandparent, or guardian. This is really an opportunity for them to become more independent and live in their own, a place of their own. The person can live in housing types that those with or those without disabilities would live in, and always, of course, based on income. You have to be able to afford the rent. And we'll talk a little bit about how that happens. And that the person has opportunities to fully participate in community life. And conversely, it's also integrated independent housing means that the person has the opportunities to decline to participate in certain activities. So it is not, this kind of housing allows you to do as much or as little as you want with regard to community activities. It's not a structured program where at certain days of the week you must do certain things. Another feature of integrated independent housing is that the housing has to be affordable. So in our definition, we go by the HUD, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development definition of affordability, which basically means that your rent and utilities cost are no more than 30 to 40% of the household's adjusted gross income. So that's sort of the rule of thumb that we use for affordability. In addition, housing is accessible or barrier-free, meaning that it's usable by people who have different kinds of disabilities. And we're going to talk about some ways to help make that happen, since finding accessible housing can be like looking for a needle in a haystack. And then the last two are perhaps some of the most important pieces. In integrated independent housing, the housing is leased or owned by the individual. And the housing is not contingent upon participation in services. And likewise, participation in services is not conditioned upon the housing in which you live. So that's really important. That separation of housing and services allows people to live where they want and get the services from whom they want, and they can change either of those things whenever they choose, without affecting their ability to access the other piece. So that's what we mean when we talk about integrated independent housing. Now, these housing resources we'll talk about today are available to a very specific part of the population. And that is people who are covered by the settlement agreement, the Department of Justice settlement agreement with the Commonwealth of Virginia. So let's talk about who that is. So the settlement agreement covers people with developmental disabilities. For the purposes of housing, they have to be 18 or older because they have to be of age to be able to enter into a contractual agreement, like a lease. And they have to be in one of these three categories. They either have to be living in a training center, intermediate care, or nursing facility and meet the level of functioning to qualify for a Medicaid waiver for people with developmental disabilities, or they have to be already receiving Medicaid waiver services for people with developmental disabilities. And I've given a couple examples of those services here. Or they have to be on a wait list for Medicaid developmental disability waiver services. So any of those three categories, as long as you have a developmental disability and you're 18 or older, would put you in the running to be eligible to be in the target population for these housing resources that we're going to discuss. In case there's anybody who isn't familiar with the Medicaid DD Waiver, that is basically Virginia Medicaid's long-term care insurance program for people with developmental disabilities who need home and community-based services. And so in Virginia, as in all states, there is a right to care in institutional settings, like the ones you see here, training center, intermediate care, or nursing facility. But there is an option to waive those settings in order to receive services in the person's home and community. So that's what the waiver is. You're waiving the institutional settings in order to get services in the home and community. Now, unfortunately, Virginia and other states are not required by Medicaid to make home and community-based services available to everyone who is eligible for them. And that's why we have a wait list. So that's what you're seeing down here, being on a wait list for these services. So that's what a waiver is. All right, so now let's just review these housing resources that we've been talking about that are integrated independent housing for people in the settlement agreement population. So we're going to talk briefly about 5 different resources. One is the state rental assistance program, which is a rent subsidy. The second is the low income housing tax credit program, and that's really housing itself, rental housing itself. The third is flexible funding, which is a pot of funds that helps people overcome barriers to making their initial transition into housing and to help people maintain that housing once they're in it. And then the last one is tenancy supports. And the tenancy supports is a service that essentially helps people access these different housing resources, helps people search for units, complete applications for both rent assistance and housing, things like that. So let's dive into these a little bit. So the state rental assistance program, as I said, is a rent subsidy. And the idea behind this rent subsidy is to provide people with developmental disabilities an opportunity to move from training centers, intermediate care and nursing facilities, group homes, and even their family homes into market rental housing. And we all know that that isn't really possible for most people with disabilities given limited incomes. So this subsidy helps cover that gap. So in the state rental assistance program, or SRAP as we call it, the renter pays about 30% of monthly adjusted income toward rent and utilities. Then the subsidy covers the difference up to a maximum limit that's based on your household size. So this is a subsidy basically where you get a certificate and you can go to any landlord in the area where the SRAP program covers and apply to rent it there in their housing. And your certificate is proof that you're eligible for the subsidy. So you apply for an apartment, and as long as that apartment meets certain requirements, the rent is within the program limit and it passes an inspection, then you'll be able to rent there and the landlord will get paid from you, your 30% portion, and then the subsidy, they'll get a separate payment for the subsidy. So as of September 1st, we have 994 SRAP subsidies in Virginia, and we have 758 Virginians who have rented in integrated independent housing using this resource. So I wanted to give you a quick sense of sort of what the availability is in Northern Virginia. So we have 5 SRAP programs here in Northern Virginia. Alexandria City's SRAP program is run by the Office of Housing in Alexandria. They have 15 slots total, of which 6 are available. Arlington County's SRAP program is run by the Arlington Housing Bureau, and they have 10 slots. They've used all 10. So at this point, they have no slots available. We're probably going to be starting a wait list in Arlington County. In Fairfax County, in the cities of Fairfax and Falls Church, the Fairfax County Department of Housing runs the SRAP program. They have 175 slots, of which they currently have 22 available. In Loudoun County, it's the Loudoun County Office of Housing and Community Development, and they have 50 slots, of which 13 are available. And last but not least, in Prince William, the Prince William Office of Housing and Community Development has 51 slots, and they have 16 available. So I've given you a link here, and I believe Diane's going to probably be disseminating these PowerPoints, so you'll have this for yourself. And this is basically a link that gives you much more detail about the state rental assistance program and how it works. So you're welcome to, there's a nice FAQ there. You're welcome to download that and take a look. So the next thing we're going to talk about is the low-income housing tax credit program. So remember, SRAP was a subsidy. The low-income housing tax credit program is actually a source of bricks and sticks housing. So this program offers affordable housing to low and moderate income households, and the rents in these properties are set for households that are within certain income ranges. Now, unfortunately, often the rents are set higher than what a single person on a fixed income, like supplemental security income, can afford without rent assistance. So that's why it's important to have SRAP before you go to apply to these properties. However, some of these tax credit properties have what we call leasing preferences for people with DD in the settlement agreement. So that means that applications from our population for available units get considered first before they start looking at other people's applications for the same units. So basically, you're getting bumped up to the head of the line for consideration for a unit. So renters can use either the state rental assistance program subsidy that we just talked about, or a housing choice voucher to help subsidize the rent if they can't cover the rent all by themselves. And in some properties, there are sometimes apartments that actually come with rent assistance attached, and our folks can also potentially access some of those. So again, as of September 1st, we have about 35 properties in Northern Virginia, throughout Northern Virginia, that operate with a leasing preference. And if you send me an email, I can give you a list of those and help you get notified about those properties that actually have currently available units. So it's important to know about the available units once you get the rent assistance, because the units come, the units go. It all depends on the market. But once you've got that SRAP subsidy and you're looking for a place, feel free to email me and I can let you know what may be out there that has this leasing preference so that you're going to be the first person considered for the unit. So let's talk a little bit about this process. It is a multi-step process. So you have to be kind of ready to go in for the long haul. But it all starts, whether it's SRAP or the leasing preference with a tax credit property, it all starts with the support coordinator, either at your local community services board or a CSB contracted agency like the ARC of Northern Virginia. Your support coordinator is going to work with the individual and their family to submit a housing referral to my agency, DBHDS. We then review that referral to confirm that the person is in the settlement agreement target population, and we help prep the referral. So we're going to be looking at things like, does this person have enough income to be able to afford to live independently, even if they're getting rent assistance? Can they afford their food, their transportation, their phone, their household supplies, all the other things that you have to pay for when you live in your own home, even if you get rent assistance? And we also want to make sure that people have the supports that they're going to need to be able to follow the terms of their lease and be a good neighbor and things like that. So we're going to be looking at what supports they need and which supports they have or may still need. Last but not least, we're going to look to see whether the person has any barriers to getting into rent assistance programs or housing. When we look at barriers, what we're really looking at are things like, do you have all the documents that you're going to need? Birth certificate, social security card, benefit letters, pay stubs, all of those kinds of things that you need to be able to qualify for rent assistance and rental housing? Do you have any legal criminal history or eviction history that could potentially result in you getting turned down by certain properties? So we're looking at all of those kinds of things. Do you have the resources to afford the upfront costs to get into housing, your security deposit, your utility deposits and connection fees, all of those kinds of things? Do you have any credit issues, any issues on your credit history that would prevent you from getting into housing? So we look at that whole picture, and if there are issues, we have back and forth conversations about how are we going to overcome these issues or address these issues to minimize the chances of them interfering with the person's ability to get into housing. So once we've done all that, we've prepped the referral. If the person is ready to go, then we're going to assign their referral to SRAP if it is needed. And then they will go and actually apply for the rent assistance, the SRAP. It's a pretty simple application. Really, the only eligibility criteria is that the person's in our target population, which we've already vetted, and that their income, household income, is less than 50% of the area median income. So pretty much any of our households that are on SSI or SSDI are going to qualify. Once they've applied for rent assistance, then if the person wants to access one of these properties that has a leasing preference, we will work with them to assign their referral to that particular property they may be interested in. And we give them a letter that basically verifies that they qualify for the leasing preference. So they take that letter and they take their SRAP certificate and they go to apply to the property. And if their application is approved to the property, then the rent assistance program will review the unit that they want to rent to make sure that it's approved, it can be approved for rent subsidy. That's where we look at, is the rent within the program limits, and is the unit gets inspected to make sure that it's going to be a safe, habitable unit for the person. Once the unit passes that inspection, then and only then should the individual sign their lease and move in. There's always a risk that if that individual enters into a lease before the unit is approved, then they're going to be on the hook for the whole rent until that unit gets approved, which could be then a year. So never sign a lease until the rent assistance program has approved your unit. All right, so we've talked about the rent assistance and the tax credit properties with a leasing preference. Now we're going to cover flexible funding. And this is a program that is operated by the CSBs up here using funding that DBHDS has made available. And it assists people with developmental disabilities with overcoming the financial barriers to making their initial transition into housing. So as you probably know, people who get SSI or people who are on Medicaid waiver aren't allowed to have more than $2,000 in assets, which makes it might be hard to save for the expenses that you have upfront to move into housing. Things like your application fees, your security and utility deposits, first month's rent, basic startup furniture, household supplies, any needed technology or modifications to the unit, things like that. So this funding source helps people overcome that financial barrier to just making the upfront transition into housing. So DD support coordinators, again, are your entrance into flexible funding. So they are going to help people submit applications. The application deadline is very tight. So your application has to go in by 30 days after the lease term begins, or otherwise it's, the person isn't going to be eligible for flexible funding. So again, I've given you a link here that gives you a lot more details about exactly what's covered, what flexible funding can cover, the process to access it, the deadlines, things like that. Some people, when they have to go through this process to get rent assistance and apply for housing and get all of their stuff and make their initial move and get set up, they need some help to make that transition. So we make tenancy supports available to people that can help people do things like identify their housing needs and preferences and barriers, help create a plan to secure housing, including that livable budget we talked about. If the person wants to have a roommate or they need a live-in aide to provide caregiving, they can help with identifying people who might play those roles. They can help the person to apply for the rent assistance and search for housing with the rent assistance. They can help them apply for the apartments. They can help arrange the moves, set up the moving company, the utilities getting the utilities turned on and setting up renter's insurance. They can help the person get their furniture and household supplies, and they can help the person learn how to get around and use their new apartment so they get familiar with how the appliances work, how the thermostat works, how the mailboxes work, all of that kind of stuff that some new renters need to learn. And then last but not least, it can help people understand the rules around using rent assistance and the lease obligations so that the person can make sure that they're always following those rules and they don't become at risk of losing their rent assistance or their housing. So there are two ways to get these kinds of tenancy supports. If a person has a Medicaid DD waiver, they can request a service called Community Housing Guide, and that will provide these supports paid for by the waiver. If the person is on the wait list, the waiver wait list, they can ask their support coordinator to be referred for the tenancy supports program at no cost. So there's no cost to the individual. So again, the way to start that process to get hooked up with somebody to provide tenancy supports is through the support coordinator. So you contact your support coordinator for a referral. All right, and I think that's it for me. So Diane, I'm going to turn it back to you and just let me know if you want to take questions now or hold. Oh, you mute.
I am muted. Okay, you know what? We have 5 minutes left for this kind of session for your section. So why don't we take a couple of questions now and then we'll stop right at 11 o'clock and let Donna go, and then we'll catch up at the end. So we have several questions in the Q&A box. So Jeannie, one of them is, where can I find information about SRAP programming in Southwestern Virginia?
I'll tell you what, I'm gonna type in my colleague's contact information. Her name is Anna Bowman, and she can let you know exactly which areas have SRAP and how many slots they have available, and get you started on getting connected to that.
Great. Another question is, does the individual applying for housing have to have a job that covers their rent, or can that funding be provided by other sources, like the family financially supporting them?
Okay, good question. So it is strongly encouraged that the person have at least something like SSI or SSDI that's going to be help them to pay their expenses in addition to their housing. Because remember, the eligibility is based on the individual's income. They're going to pay 30% of their income toward their housing, and whatever they have left has to cover all their other expenses. So if they don't have any income, that's going to be incredibly challenging. And then this part B of that question was, well, could a family provide support? Well, that's a double-edged sword. Because if the family then contributes income to the person, it's going to be considered the person's income, and they're going to be charged 30% of those family contributions toward rent. So basically what you've done is sold your soul to the devil. And now you're basically, in this feedback loop where you're continually providing more and more support to the family member you're hoping to get connected to rent assistance so that you don't have to provide that support. So what I can tell you is some families have kind of, so the first recommendation is get on SSI or DI if the person is eligible. The second recommendation is, yes, if the person can work, they should get connected to a job before they apply. Not required, but it's strongly suggested because otherwise you're in that feedback loop I just discussed. And third, if the family does want to be able to help that person get established, because maybe their job isn't going to cover all their expenses, or maybe SSI isn't going to cover all their living expenses, I would really suggest you get an ABLE account set up, because you can fund that ABLE account and that can be used to pay or offset some of those expenses that the individual is going to have, things like their transportation, their phone bill, their household expenses, supplies, that kind of stuff. And that, when it's run through the ABLE account, those funds are not considered income or assets or resources that can be tapped to have to, go toward rent. So I really strongly urge folks to work on the ABLE account as another mechanism to kind of shelter those contributions from being considered income and then upping the rent portion that the person pays.
And we have a lot of information about ABLE accounts on our website, so I'll send that information out as well. Jeannie, we'll take one last question and then save the rest for the end. Regarding SRAP, can our kids 18 plus on the DD wait list use that to subsidize rent payments on housing that their parents own?
Oh, good question. So no. So similar to the Housing Choice Voucher Program, which is a federally operated program, individuals, units cannot be subsidized if they are owned by a parent, grandparent, or guardian. Now, units can be subsidized if they are owned by somebody else. So that unit could be subsidized if it were owned by cousin or another, distant relative, those kinds of things. Unlike the voucher program, which doesn't allow you to do that, but not if the parent, grandparent, or guardian owns a unit. The unit could also be placed in a special needs trust with a trustee that is not a parent, grandparent, or guardian. That's another option. But if the unit is outright owned by a parent, grandparent, or guardian, then it can't be subsidized.
Okay, thanks, Jeannie. We're going to turn it over to Donna Budway now from our stomping ground, and then we will catch up on the questions at the end. So let me share my screen. Okay. All right, Donna, thank you.
Appreciate it. Just as a little bit of an introduction, I have been a community organizer for the last 25 years. I've got a background in public health, and full disclosure, in the 80s, I worked as a Peace Corps volunteer, which has probably given me the belief that it is always possible to do something with very little. So that is kind of part of the birth of this nonprofit. And I should say, as I start to speak, that really thanks to Jeannie at the state level and the ARC of Northern Virginia and their advocacy and the vast ability that they have to educate us at opportunities like today, and really a lot of very hardworking caseworkers that we all have. We have been able to transition almost 60 young and older adults into affordable, inclusive housing with this model. So I'm going to talk a little, and Diana's going to watch my time. I've got about 14 minutes left to go, so she's going to give me a 2-minute warning. But I do want to say just up front is that I am going to push you a little bit. I am very, very enthusiastic. It's part of my personality, but really what I want you to do is I want to share that I recognize that this is a huge paradigm shift, and it's going to make a lot of us very uncomfortable. I was very uncomfortable about this model not too long ago when Jeannie held our family's hand when we did this. Our daughter does live in the first property that we opened with APA, Arlington Property Partnership for Affordable Housing. So I just want you to consider that whatever you take away from what I tell you today, that I really want you to consider this as an opportunity to find community and stabilize housing for your young adult or older adult in the most inclusive setting possible. All right, so slide 2. We are a new nonprofit. You'll see our mission here. And we are very excited. We started a bunch of parents in Northern Virginia came together right before COVID, maybe not the best time now we look back on it, but I have to say for a daughter that lived through that and sitting on Arlington County's DD committee for the CSB and hearing other stories, I actually think we probably fared a lot better being out in the community because at least they were isolated with a large group of people instead of being, isolated in our family home or in a group home. So we're actually very, very grateful for that. In the last year, we've been able to hire an executive director. We're really excited to have her at the helm of our organization and our second community builder. And we did previously hire a program director who has just been amazing for our community. Okay, slide 3. Jeannie talked a little bit about the settlement and what that meant. Most of you probably are aware that historically people with disabilities with significant support needs have been institutionalized or placed in group homes. And that is what the settlement was trying to get at, is try to get the Commonwealth to have more inclusive opportunities in education, housing, and employment. And what we know is that nationally, about 75% of people with developmental disabilities live with their families, and 20% of them have a caregiver or parent who is over the age of 60. And to add more trouble into that storm, we know that 83% of these individuals are unemployed. So really what we're trying to do is encourage families to think of sustainability. And I was telling her again this week that she was a person that pushed me, but it really was a friend of mine many years ago that said, Donna, you cannot have Emma's first night outside of the family home be the first day after your funeral. So again, that is a harsh reality for a lot of us. But she denies she ever said that. She says, I drug her into this. But absolutely, we need to think about that kind of sustainability for all of us. And so what we're going to talk about a lot this morning is how we are going to build better communities. We know that loneliness as an epidemic is a public health issue across all populations, but certainly for our friends with disabilities. Okay, slide 4, please. Thank you. So I should say up front that we very much are a housing first model. We believe that housing is fundamentally a human right, and there is going to be some risk involved here. There is no doubt. When you allow someone to live their most self-determined life, there are going to be risks. And that is, my parents, they did the same thing with me. When I decided that I wanted to go to college and I may not go to bed on time and I may not keep my room as clean as it's supposed to be, or I'm going to travel the world, my parents could have stopped me at any point in that adventure. And I know you're saying, well, it's okay, Donna, you're different. But really what we want you to explore is the idea is maybe it isn't that much different. Does every person deserve that dignity to maybe make some risk? And it is a little bit scary. So we have been wrestling a lot in our community and in our organization and with our friends to kind of the way we look at what is that goal of being independent? And maybe what we're really looking for is more interdependence. I know for a lot of us, and for myself, Jeannie did a lot of hand holding. Like I had this long list of things that my daughter needed to be able to do before she could leave the family home. A lot of those activities of daily living, right? Those ADLs. And if I had waited for her to master that list, I'm afraid we would still be waiting. And there's still things that we have to work on. So the idea of housing first is we get someone into housing, we figure out what those supports are, we surround them with those supports, and then we work on developing more of those skills. And the younger the parents and the family and the caregivers are around that individual, the easier it's going to be, because this is not, you kind of drive up and then drive away. I mean, families certainly do choose to do that, but for a lot of us that want to stay more involved, it's going to be a certain amount of effort. And I want to say that out front, but I promise you, I think that loneliness epidemic isn't just affecting our adult children with disabilities, it's also affecting our families. And many of us have been isolated away from community. So, I maybe do go on a lot of the community walks, but I'm also filling my own needs, right? I mean, I need that community. I want people to know my daughter and understand the way she presents in the community. So we're actually kind of working on that for everyone. I want everything we talk about today, thinking about your child that has a disability, the family around that person, or the caregivers, the support people around that person, and also to think of the broader the community that is going to learn to love and accept and understand your adult child and are going to be part of that circle support that the ARC of Northern Virginia always tries to encourage us to grow for all of us. So we are really trying to get everybody to live their most self-actualized, kind of self-determined life, right? And that's going to look differently for every person. But certainly deciding, do I want to go swimming today? Or do I not want to go swimming today? Do I want to plug in for the social justice group on Monday nights? Or maybe that new book on Tuesday night looks good. We want people to be able to make those decisions. And really importantly, and I'm going to have you try to lean into this nomenclature with me, is that we're really trying not to think of someone's functionality. I want you to think, we all do it. We kind of talk about an individual's, someone's high functioning or someone's low functioning. And I want us all to explore who that serves. Because if you have a high functioning child and they've heard you say that all their life, or at least since diagnosis, and now that individual is unemployed, they may have dropped out of college, they may not have friends, and they're living in your basement, that is not a really good feeling, and we probably haven't served that individual. And then if you have someone like my daughter, who everyone clearly identifies as low functioning, she has now heard that is her potential in life. And I would argue that doesn't serve her, and it doesn't serve the family, and it blocks us sometimes from seeing someone's potential. So I really want us all to kind of think of what can we do to help these individuals that we care about live their fullest life. All right, slide number 5. One of the most important things, I've said a little bit about the Housing First model, is that I want everyone to understand, and this includes our friends in Farmville, like anyone outside of the state, outside of the area, outside of the state, you do not have to be housed in one of these units and all those opportunities that Jeannie just talked about to need community, right? And it's going to look a lot different for a lot of people. So we include everyone. I think our CRM is now about 1,000 people. And any of those individuals can come to anything. And if it helps you to kind of come out and see what community looks like and get your adult child or your younger child, like we just had an event on Sunday for children. We want everyone to have this vision of this is what the future looks like. So we want everybody to be involved in this program. And we now have over 100 hours of free programming a month, and we are super excited about that. One of the reasons we are able to do that is because we have these amazing interns with George Washington University. You see Hannah here in the middle. She was our art therapist intern last year, and she did a lot of individual groups for our community. She did some amazing group. I'm surprised we still have a relationship with GW. The agreement was we would never have any more than 12 artists in the room. And I think we had some weeks where 30 people showed up, and somehow we managed to make that happen. But just the excitement around having places to go, making friends. We just did a supper club. We have another one actually Thursday night in Alexandria, but we can have 40 people show up. We can have a hike. We've got a hike scheduled on Saturday morning at 10 o'clock at Huntley Meadow. Like just a million opportunities for people to come where they're making new friends. You'll see here we have a lot of baking and nutrition classes at our properties, and we've got some yoga instructors. We've got a new one that's going to be starting in Herndon, and this is our yoga group that meets in Arlington. But our friends are welcome to come from everywhere. So very much integrative programming. We want to, we kind of have a social approach, educational, that would include, I mentioned the book club, social justice. We have a really great, robust health curriculum that we've done with the public health students from GW. Therapeutic, you see our friend Juan here on a bike. All of our friends have an opportunity in any of our neighbor any of our neighborhoods are able to, anyone with OSG is able to get a $5, those red bikes you see all through Northern Virginia. We have annual memberships, and then we help our friends learn how to ride a bike, or, you know, just come watch their other friends be successful on a bike. But really what we want to do is be able to figure out what our friends' needs are and be able to offer programming that allows them to get into the community. Okay, our next slide, please, Diane. Okay, so when you heard Jeannie talking about those 35 properties that are now have that LIHTC, that opportunity in Northern Virginia, just to let you know that we are currently, our stomping ground is currently connected to 6 of those properties. And one soon will be coming up in the new year. But our first property where our daughter lives, I'll just give you a little bit of understanding of what this usually looks like. Gilliam Place is a multi-generational unit with 173 units. 8 initially were set aside for the DD population. So they had that leasing preference that Jeannie was talking about. My last count last week, we now have 14 individuals with disability, because individuals do have the opportunity to come in what we call the front door, or that maybe it's the back door, with just affordable housing, right? And what we're seeing is that families that didn't think that this was maybe a potential for their young adult or older adult are now seeing what these communities look like and are kind of clamoring for more room. I tell people we probably have reached our match. I feel kind of strongly that the sweet spot is probably around 10% of a building census, and then we can have some growth, but we always want it, we don't want it to be the biggest group home in Virginia. We do want it to stay inclusive housing. So the total property has about 500 people, and their babies. We just had a baby born last month, and they're older people. 2 friends are in the hospital right now, and we care about everybody. We care that our friends come to the yoga. We care that the neighbors join us on the community walks. We try to have 2 a day. Like, we really want to understand who needs help with tutoring. Can we get you some help with tutoring? With a wonderful partnership with the church, we now have free music lessons for anybody that lives in this property. And that just isn't our friends with disability. That's our 70-year-old friend who grew up without that opportunity to take music lessons. So we're all growing and getting to know each other. And, you know, an exciting part of that is our daughter, we had a blackout in the building. Of course, it was a night that she had chosen to be there alone. Her live-in aide was not home that night. But because we have this robust relationship, I got a couple texts from other people in the building and said, hey, the power's out. How is Emma doing? You know, so we were able to use the Alexa and drop in and see her in the dark with her little screen in front of her face. And she was able to communicate to us that, yeah, I'm a little lonely and I'm a little scared. That's the dignity she had of being there, that decision she made. But yeah, you know what? I'd like my brother and his girlfriend to get over here and read to me for a little bit. So, you know, there's these ways that community are working in really, really wonderful ways. And the last thing I'll say about these 6 properties, and then the 7th one that's coming on, is that we have a lot of families that are now making this decision. You know, maybe this isn't what we want for now, but maybe when we're making these decisions for where our adult child lives, maybe we'll pick someplace close to one of these properties. So you'll see we have a presence now. Our farthest west is the Ovation at Arrowbrook in Herndon. It's a beautiful new property. That's our latest property open. We're going to have one university, I struggle with the name of that, across from George Mason University, that'll open next year. Jeannie has shared with me, we have 12 units there, 6 for the DD population and 6 for the severe mental illness. And sometimes we end up bleeding into those a little bit, but those are filling up very fast. She's busy doing referrals for that. But we also have families that are deciding then they will live close to one of these properties, even if they decide that they would like to do a group home or they're going to do something with another group of friends. Maybe it makes sense to live closer to this area where there's going to be a lot of community activities going on. I should say one more thing about, did you want to tell me, Diane? I have a couple minutes.
Yeah, I'm just going to say you got 2 minutes.
Okay, perfect. That's all I need. The last thing we're excited about the George Mason property is that We've already talked to the School of Social Work there, and they're really excited about having an army of interns for us over there. So the last slide I'm going to show you really fast. We're really excited about a study we did with GW and Millwood. We had 76 subjects, and we wanted to look at health outcomes and see if there were any differences between individuals that were housed in one of these OSG. When I say OSG properties, I'm not saying we own them or we run them. These are just places that we have a presence and we're supporting all the residents. But in those 6 properties, we wanted to see if there was difference between individuals that were housed outside the family home or whether or not they were still living in a group home or they were living in the family home. And the exciting news was that 84% of all the participants in the study said they have a very good quality of life, good or very good. And the very exciting thing, which we did not expect to see, is that there was no significant difference in where someone was living if they had this kind of programming and if they'd found this kind of community for themselves. So we're gonna stop so we can get on to the exciting other speakers. But I do want to say, you've probably noticed that I am probably going through some significant health challenges, and I have never felt so strongly in the importance of community. So please come check us out. Please see what is possible and join us for what could potentially be a very exciting, inclusive future for your adult child. All right. Thank you. Thanks, Diane. Good time.
Donna, thank you. I'm inspired every time you speak. So thank you for sharing all of that information with us. All right, let me stop sharing this. And now I'd like to welcome Donna Vostel and Patrick Cross. They are parents who have been through all of this building a creative housing solution with their children, and they're going to share their story with us. Donna put together a slide presentation, so let me share that with you all.
And while she's sharing, thank you so much for inviting me. And frankly, I am now completely intimidated by Donna and Jeannie's presentation, probably Donna, because it really is a splendid model. We had a different model, and I wanted to come today to just talk to you about our daughter, one mom and dad, and lots of adventure. So next slide, please. Our daughter Stephanie decided during her 2nd year at Mason Life that she wanted to stay in Fairfax. We are across the Potomac in Maryland, and she decided that she enjoyed her life in Fairfax and wanted to live independently. So in 2015, we bought a house in the city of Fairfax. It was the 3rd house for adults with special needs in a neighborhood very close to the Mason campus. I think Patrick might have owned the 1st house, or 2nd. And so we are sort of very early timers in this move. At that point, we gathered 3 other young women and their families, and we discussed moving into the house and all of the things that you are thinking about as you consider moving your young adults into independent living. We did too. and frankly, it was pretty daunting, but we moved forward, and a few roommates, and 7 years later, we now have 3 women, including my daughter, in their 30s that live together and have lived together now for 3 years. The 3 of them, they all have jobs and they enjoy active social lives. And I am very jealous of Donna's incredible organizational and social advocacy, because that really looks terrific. That these the women in our houses have their own move forward to push their social lives forward. We were so pleased with how well Steph was doing that in 2018, we had been considering moving down there during retirement as things move forward. So in 2018, we saw an opportunity to buy a 2nd house in the neighborhood for our eventual retirement, but weren't ready quite to move down, and I don't think Steph was quite ready to have us. So it is now home to 3 women with special needs and 1 support staff. Next slide, please. So how it works, we collect rent, and we appreciate Jeannie's point that now houses like the one we bought almost 10 years ago are not going to be supported, but at this point we still have stuff in that house. We collect rent from each tenant. Of the 6 residents in the 2 houses, 4 have SRAP. Steph is the only SRAP recipient in her house, and our rent includes utilities and internet and cable. We do the maintenance. They do the housekeeping and change the light bulbs. That's the tenant's gig, and we are breaking even. We're not making money. We're not losing money. And all the money returns back into the property for updates and maintenance and things like that. I'm going to come at this from a little bit more social perspective. Probably the hardest part of these houses, of us working with these houses, is that sometimes the social dynamics within the houses can get tricky. And in fact, I think the hardest part is finding roommates that really fit the bill. Always the people are acceptable, but as you all know, that you can't always live with everyone. So sometimes someone will come into the house and the soup just doesn't taste correct, and there's conflict and friction. So moving through that and working through that, I think, is something that is recognizable to happen, and you just keep working and keep communicating and keep talking to move things forward. But in the second house where our daughter doesn't live, I was very clear with the residents that I wasn't going to get involved in the social dynamics of the houses. And I worked really hard to make sure everyone knew each other before they moved in. And I don't hire the house staff. Next slide. There are pros and cons to encouraging independent living. The cons are it was scary. As everyone has said, we anticipated all kinds of issues. There are practical questions, which I think Donna touched on very well, which is, how will they eat? Will they take care of themselves? What happens when they're sick? What happens when they have a power out? Will they go out? Will they socialize? And I think that Donna's model really has a lot of those push forward. And in ours, we just, again, sort of anticipated and hovered a little bit and kept walking forward. We have definitely made mistakes, as all of you or some of you may know, raising adult children, even those without special needs, that sometimes you step in when you probably should have stepped back. And we my husband and I continue to monitor our behavior when there's something going on at the house about what the best strategy is to deal with it, to optimize everyone's maturation and growth and sense of independence. The pros are that we would never, ever have anticipated Stephanie's maturation and confidence when we started this whole gig. We are amazed, and as are her sibs, she has a couple of brothers and our extended family, that she really has embraced this, taken it onto her own, and feels independent. Not by saying I'm independent, by making decisions without asking, and they're good decisions. And I think that growing as a parent of an adult, there's a whole new parenting skill set, and we are learning that she can really push beyond what we ever expected. The parents of the women who live in the houses tell us that their daughters are happy and thriving. And we really, now that our daughter is not in our house, have more time for our lives. And probably the thing that Donna touched upon and is really important to us is the last 7, 8, 9 years has been an opportunity for us to understand what Steph needs as she becomes more independent. And in preparing for Steph's future, we can make mistakes, correct mistakes, adapt, and not do it when we are really either not healthy or older and have more difficulty making those adaptations. So I think for us, that's the high view is that we have the time to do this. I think this is next is the last slide. So the future, what happens next? There's certainly something going to happen we haven't thought of. Probably it will happen tomorrow. Try to keep our sense of humor. I think the sustainability, which Donna talked about, is really something we've thought about a lot. Who helps? What kind of net do we put underneath to make sure that everything's taken care of? But if you ask Stephanie and her roommates, they consider this their forever home. And we actually think that's possible. Next slide. We also truly appreciate Judy Cummins and her team who were there from the start of this adventure, have always believed in my daughter and her community. And for all the parents and young adults who have laughed with us and supported the dream and continue to think independent living forward, for those people, we are very grateful. And that's it. Thank you.
Donna, thank you so much for sharing your story and your experience. Patrick, would you like to add anything, share your story? You're welcome to turn your video on.
Yeah, I'm actually about to get in the car to take my son up to Baltimore for a Kennedy Krieger appointment, so I'll forego the video. Yeah, so I really don't have a ton to add. I mean, we kind of started similarly. We bought the house in 2014, and one of the differences is we actually bought it with another family. So we split the house, and we've put all the finances into an LLC to provide separation for that, and it's worked out, well for us in terms of having. So we essentially got the two young adult children for the two parents who own the house, and then two additional roommates that have intellectual disabilities, and also, an RA there. We call them an RA, but that's essentially the role that they're providing is just making sure that the house is taken care of and helping with chores and dealing with the inevitable, when an issue comes up, that issue. We've been very lucky. Two of the RAs we got were ex Mason Life RAs, and so that's been super helpful because they already have experience with people with disabilities. They understand the process of getting people in.
Patrick,
Social issues. Yeah,
you're fading
sorry.
out just a little bit.
All right, hang on one sec. See if I can figure out how to get back to my. It just picked up the. All right, is that better?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. And so having somebody that has experience as a Mason, that do the Mason Life as an RA has been very helpful. I think for some of the people that we've had do that, one of the guys did not do that, and he still did fine. But some of the nuances around the social issues and a few things were stuff he just hadn't had to deal with before, and so some of that was a little bit harder for him. What are some of the other things? We did have one for 2 years. We actually did have a typical student living there as well when one of the people with intellectual disability moved out. And that worked out okay, but not great. That was a bit of a weirdness that we had. I don't think what other. We're sort of financially, it's a similar situation for us. We're breaking even on the house. We're not making any money. It's been, and we've had, a decent amount of maintenance to do to the house. We've had to replace the AC, replace the roof, stuff like that. And that's been, it hasn't, been a huge financial burden to manage all of that. In terms of all the maintenance, there's a good, a lot of the people use like the same lawn maintenance company. We do have a maid come in every few weeks just to do a deeper clean. Otherwise, the place tends to start looking a little bit like a frat house. but that's probably not all that unexpected with, you know, 5 guys living there. I think those are all the big things that are a little bit different from our perspective. You know, it's been a great experience. I can say that, you know, certainly during COVID, when our son had to come home and live with us again, you know, it's not something he wants to do. You know, he very much sees that as his house, his home, you know, where he wants to be. And so it's, you know, I think at the long term, that's really where he wants to be right now. And I think that that's going to persist. I am excited to hear that there's one of the community properties going in around Mason. I think that'd be great for the community there with all the houses to provide some additional opportunities for interaction, you know, social activities, physical fitness activities, all that stuff. I think that'd be great.
Great, thank you.
And that's,
Thanks, Patrick. I'm sorry, did you have more you wanted to add? So if I can ask our other presenters to just turn their cameras back on. I think Jeannie answered a bunch of questions online that were in the Q&A box, so thank you, Jeannie. Is there any of the questions in there that stood out to you that you want to share with the other families that may be beneficial across the board?
Gosh, just looking through them. Hold on a second. Oh, well, there was a question about, you know, if a person isn't yet on the waiver wait list, can they access these resources? And the answer is no, unfortunately. So the settlement agreement that the Department of Justice is enforcing basically require the only population that it will cover are people who are either receiving Medicaid waiver or are on the wait list for the waiver. So we are bound to those restrictions. So it's going to be really important to, you know, get assessed through your local community services board to see if the person is eligible for the waiver, and then they'll be placed on the wait list. And at that point, you can then talk with a support coordinator at the CSB, the Community Services Board, or a contracted CSB agency, to be able to start the process to get access to these housing resources.
Thanks, Jeannie. There was one question in there, Donna, or were you talking about Woodley Place?
I don't think that's to me. Is that to me?
Donna Budway.
That is
Yeah.
to you, because I think that's that neighborhood. There's that neighborhood
Oh,
Fairfax City. Is that where you guys are?
I don't know if it's Woodley Place. The neighborhood that our houses are in is right next to George Mason University, right next to City Hall, off of 123. I don't think that neighborhood's called Woodley Place. But I wanted to add one thing because Patrick reminded me, our sons and daughters know each other, and that is a source of support. So although the model that Donna presented is cool, this also has a neighborhood support. I think there are now 15 houses for adults with special needs in this particular neighborhood that are within walking distance of each other. Just like all neighborhoods, I don't love all my neighbors. They don't all love each other, but they do chill, and they definitely support. When there's a big bee in the house, they call someone from the neighborhood, and one of those guys come in and gets the bee out, you know, so.
There are just some questions on here about applying for the waiver and support coordinators. I will send out additional information on how to apply for the waiver. So I will send that out to all the families. There's a question about how did you get the houses without the NIMBY issues that keep group homes out of neighborhoods? Has anybody had experience with that?
Okay, it looks like someone's going to answer that. We didn't have a problem.
yeah, we didn't either. I mean, we just, so, you know, there's, in that neighborhood, there are tons of houses that rent out to students. And so it's really no different. We're just another house that has, you know, a bunch of young adults living in it together.
And the neighborhood has been nothing. I don't know any of the houses, and Patrick, tell me if I'm wrong, that have ever had an issue with neighbors saying, we don't like you here. or even subversively doing that. We have always.
No. Yeah, in fact, the next door neighbor for us has come over many times when I'm there, and just said, if you need anything, let me know. The kids are great. It's he's been very supportive, and so we've had nothing but positive reactions.
Great.
We
And then,
have had that issue. Sorry, Diane.
yeah, go.
But I think, that's also part of the model of inclusive living, right? People haven't seen this. Like even in Arlington, Fairfax County, we don't have inclusive schools. So there is a lot of the unknown about us, but we are part of that. Our neighbors that maybe didn't want an affordable housing property in their neighborhood, I think they're rethinking it. Like we pick up their trash twice a day. We're inviting them to our concerts. Like we're getting to know these people that quite frankly never would have known us if we'd stayed institutionalized, right? So there is some work to be done. This is a paradigm shift, but it can be done and people can change attitudes, and that's exciting.
And Donna, where is the place near GMU? What's the name of it? Do you know?
What? I always get this wrong. One University, right, Jeannie?
Yeah, it's actually going to be, so this is a really weird property because it's got kind of like, I want to say 3 components to it. The whole thing is one university. There's a multifamily property, multifamily meaning, families of all ages can rent there. That's called the Robinson at one university. There's a senior living property, and I don't know yet the age limit. If you either have to be 55 and older or 62 and older, still trying to get that information. That's also there on the same, parcel or lot. And then there's student housing for the GMU students. And in some cases, they're going to be, these different buildings are going to be sharing common amenities, things like community rooms and business centers and stuff like that, gyms, facility, exercise facilities, stuff like that. So the multifamily property, which is the one that our folks seem to be, kind of focused on, is the Robinson at one university. The senior property is the Belmont at one university. And I don't know the name of the student property.
We just have time for one more question. How do the communities handle transportation needs?
So for our houses, there's bus lines that are really great in Fairfax. They use the bus, they use the metro, but they also Uber and Lyft. And again, another situation where we were worried that there would be problems, and in the 5 or 6 years that Steph and her team have been Ubering, they really haven't met with any more problems than the rest of us have with the Uber.
Yep, and we're doing the same. We're walking. I mean, they're taking public transportation. We're taking advantage of travel training that's available through the ARC of North Virginia, but also we're doing our own travel training. And we're really excited to see some of our friends now going between properties and then events that they never thought was possible. Yesterday we went down to a museum and we had friends that their family put them on the metro, and then we met them when they got to the mall, but people got there all different sorts of ways. And we had a great group that, made new friends and had an experience that they wouldn't have otherwise had, because we're lucky enough that we do live in this urban setting and we're taking advantage of public transportation. Absolutely.
I want to add it. So there's one that asked any safety concerns. I am the mother of a 32-year-old, lovely daughter, terrified sometimes. Have to let her fly. Benefits outweigh risks. Risks are real. We try to minimize them, but don't think for a second that we aren't concerned. Of course we are. And I don't.
Don, is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's scary. We had someone yesterday I knew was in the bathroom, and we had a guest who just was convinced there's no way that adult that hadn't left the museum. And so I kind of got, of course, the person knew exactly where they were. He's a 27-year-old man. He's entitled to go to the bathroom and take as much time as he wants. Like, we have to let them live their lives. And, it's right. Are we supposed to be panicking, or are we supposed to let them live their lives? And we can do, right, Donna, a little bit of both. And we try not to be too public about the panicking. But yeah, I mean, we live in an amazing place. Like, we're just trying to let them take advantage of this exciting place that we live. So
and to feel great about themselves in doing it.
Oh my gosh, the feeling. I know we had someone who walked home, left a group and walked home. Someone who, quite frankly, was my daughter and had no business doing this. But when we asked her later why she did it and how she felt about doing it, she goes, well, it was a little scary, but I am so proud of myself. And I mean, I think that's why she did it. Like, she needed that feeling, like she wants that feeling. And there, quite frankly, are not a lot of opportunities for some of our friends with really significant support needs. So this is scary, but was it worth the way she feels at the end of the day? I'm afraid absolutely it was.
Great. All right. Well, thank you all very much for today. You shared just great inspirational information and really practical information for how to do this. So I'm going to send out additional information. There was a question in the chat about, can you participate in our Stomping Grounds activities? We have a social and recreation sheet that has their link on that, so I'll share that out. I really suggest signing up for their newsletter, because each week they send out all the activities that you can participate in. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to me. But like I said, I'll send out the slides and the recording within a day or two. So thank you all very much for being here.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. I'm amazed. Take care, everyone. Good luck. One step at a time.
Exactly.
That's right.
Bye-bye now.
Bye.